Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about all of the things that you can start from seed, direct sow, or transplant right now during the month of May. This guide is most applicable to those in garden zones 8 and up, those of us that are about to go into intensely hot summers with days in a row above 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So if that's your situation, I have a lot of ideas for you. My name is Jara. I teach people how to garden, grow food, raise backyard chickens, and keep bees. If those type of topics interest you, make sure to subscribe to my channel because I post new videos on a daily basis to inspire and educate others. So let's get started with my May garden guide by talking about the overarching goal for this month and some gardening to-dos, so to speak. The goal for the month of May is to transition to crops and plants that easily grow and survive our summers. Don't be planting any more traditional crops like lettuce, tomatoes, kale, carrots if you're in zones 8 and up. Yes, I said tomatoes. Tomatoes are a fall, winter, and spring crop for those of us in areas that don't get any snow. Some of you in zones 8 might get away with growing tomatoes during the summer, but definitely zones 9 and up, don't even try. We are going into the hottest months of the year. It is critical that you focus on cultivars that have high heat tolerance, disease resistance, and pest tolerances or resistance. I call summer gardening jungle gardening. Whatever grows in hot tropical climates will do best. For inspiration, I look at crops from other countries like Asia, Africa, South America, and the Caribbean on what to grow this time of year. For example, I don't grow traditional market cucumbers during the summer. They're not very tough plants and have very little disease resistance. But they do great during my fall, winter, and spring, just not summer when the diseases are out of control due to all the monsoon rains that I get every day. Leaf diseases really proliferate in wet conditions. Instead, I switched to Asian cucumber cultivars that have higher disease and pest resistance. I still grow and harvest cucumbers straight through the summer. It's just that I have to select the correct cultivar to make that happen. Another example are traditional bush beans or pole beans. They really start to struggle in the high heat of summer for me, so I switched to yard-long beans instead. Easy. By making these simple cultivar switches, you can still harvest a lot of food during the summer. Let's talk about our May to-do list. I'm in Florida and it rains like a monsoon here every single day during the summer. Heat and humidity cause the pests and diseases to really proliferate. I see a surge in aphids, stink bugs, squash bugs, vine borers, the worms, like everything. It is very important that you have your garden treatments ready and in stock at home so you can start treating for these things as soon as you see them. Also, a special note for Floridians. You need to hone in on your fertilization strategy. The summer rains wash nutrients out of our native sandy soil very easily. It just goes right out through and into our water table. So because of that, I see an increase in blossom end rot, iron deficiencies, and just in general nutritional deficiencies during the summer. To help combat that, I really like to fertilize in small weekly doses with an organic granular fertilizer to keep the nutrients consistently available. A gardening to-do for all of us, no matter where you're located, is to plant as many trap crops as possible. Examples include sunflowers, marigolds, blue Hubbard squash, to control these pests organically. And I always have BT or spinosad handy. By the way, I have several seed collections on my website to help guide you picking out seeds depending on your goals and what you want to do. One of those collections is a trap crop collection, so you basically get 6 packs of seeds for different trap crops for the price of 5. So if you need help picking out some trap crops, this collection is awesome. Another to-do is you should be checking on your garden on a weekly basis to prune out any diseased, old, or dead leaves because these are basically hosts for the pathogens that spread around in your garden. I really like to spray with 1 cup of hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water to treat powdery mildew and a lot of other leaf diseases. Alright, so let's get into all of the crops that you can plant in May. And by the way, you can probably find seeds or plants for many of these crops I'm about to mention on my website. Also, I post the list of everything that you can grow during the month of May on my website. So if you want to find it in written form to copy, share, save, whatever, you can find it on there, or you can join my email newsletter and have it automatically sent to you on the 1st of every month. Links for my website guide and the email newsletter sign up are in the description below. Let's talk about all of the different crops that you can direct sow in the month of May. First up, we have squash and pumpkins. If you want to grow squash or pumpkins during the summer, pick the cultivars in the Cucurbitaceae moscata family because this group has thicker and harder stems that make it more difficult for the pests like these squash bugs and the vine borers to get into. Some examples of my favorites include Seminole pumpkin, calabaza, and Trombotina rapicante. I'm not saying that you're not going to get the pests, but these cultivars can handle a lot of pest damage before ultimately dying, so it increases your chances of harvesting something. You will get worm damage, so just be prepared. I personally like to use BT or spinosad sprays, and if you want to get the same ones that I use in my garden, I have linked them below in the description. Next up, we have cucumbers. So I switched to growing the Asian cucumber cultivars. An example is like this Soyu Nishiki or the Japanese long, because they have a much higher disease resistance, which is key since the summer heat and rains cause leaf diseases to proliferate. And just like the squashes and pumpkins, you're probably going to get worms on your cucumbers. So be ready with that BT and spinosad spray. And if I do get any leaf diseases, I spray with 1 cup of hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water. The next crop we're going to talk about are beans. Now, traditional bush or vining pole beans do not like high heat conditions. So by the month of May, I'm already harvesting up all of those crops and I'm done with them. But if you want to grow something that is bean-like during the summer, switch to yard-long beans or winged beans. Yard-long beans are commonly grown in Asia and they get very long, hence the name yard-long beans. So I like to just chop them up and dice them up just like you would regular green beans. They perform awesome no matter how hot or rainy it is in my garden. I have these yard-long beans growing up this cattle panel trellis, and it's just gorgeous watching all the little strings of beans drop down so that I could harvest them. This particular variety right here is my personal favorite one, and it's the light green colored yard-long beans. I don't know, I just really like the texture of them. I love to grow different colors of the same crops, and there is a red colored yard-long bean. The cultivar is called Red Noodle, and that one's really beautiful too. The pods are a deep dark reddish color, and they really stand out against the green foliage, making it easier to harvest. I don't have winged beans growing in this garden right here, but I do have them growing in my second garden on my aunt's property. But I love winged beans because they're perennial crops. One of my garden goals is to incorporate more perennial edible crops, which is fairly easy if you're in garden zones 9 and up. There's a lot of different options. So winged beans are awesome if you are in an area that doesn't get snow, like it doesn't freeze, because winged beans are a tropical crop. Yard-long beans are really easy to grow too. They don't have very many pest or disease issues. The number one thing that sometimes I'll see on them are these like black little aphids, because they love to suck the juices out of your bean type crops. One thing you can do about the aphids is just spray them off with your hose, because I don't want to get rid of the aphids or treat for them. They are a food source for ladybugs and a lot of other beneficial insects. So most often, if you're looking at this and you notice a lot of aphids, you probably will find a couple ladybugs in there. I only treat for aphids if the problem or the infestation is so severe and they're sucking so much juice out of my bean crops that the bean pods start to look a little misformed, misshapen. That's when I'm like, okay, I gotta treat for this, because it's actually affecting the plant at that point. I recommend the use of organic insecticidal soap sprays if you do decide you have to treat for the aphids. Another summer crop that I look forward to growing every year is loofah. Loofah seeds have a very hard shell, so definitely soak them overnight if you can. And if you still struggle trying to get these to germinate, I do have a YouTube video that shows you like my setup and my tips and tricks for getting really fast germination with your loofah seeds. I'll link that video below in the description. If you're not interested in growing loofah for the sponges, grow it for the bees and the butterflies, because they absolutely love these big flat yellow flowers. Loofah is actually a gourd, and if you harvest it young, like no more than around 7 inches long, it can be eaten just like zucchini. A lot of people say it tastes better than zucchini. Some other crops that you can start from seed during the month of May is moringa, like these trees right behind me, and any kind of edible gourds like snake beans. You want to transplant these crops as soon as your last frost date has passed. I have a how to germinate moringa YouTube tutorial, and I'll link that in the description below if you need some help, because moringa seeds have a very hard shell, so it makes it hard to get them to germinate. Next up, we have southern peas like black-eyed peas, cowpeas, and okra. You can easily start direct sowing seeds for any kind of the peas as soon as your last average spring frost date is passed. My personal favorite is the pink-eyed purple hull pea, because there's a really nice buttery flavor and texture. Let's not forget about flowers, because flowers not only add beauty to the garden, but they also help out the bees and the pollinators. Some of the easiest heat tolerant, drought tolerant, and quick to bloom from seed flowers that come up to my mind immediately are zinnias like these right here, and this beautiful agastache, which is actually a perennial herb that blooms these beautiful blue flower spikes, and the bees go crazy over it. And let's not forget sunflowers. All types of sunflowers do really great during the summer. They also produce a lot of seeds that are a great food source for birds and my chickens. But lastly, and most importantly, sunflowers are a trap crop for stink bugs. So if you have a real bad stink bug issue, plant as many sunflowers as you can. Let's talk about two more crops, herbs and corn. Say goodbye to your traditional herbs. Seriously, mine literally evaporate overnight. Instead, focus on tropical herbs like Thai basil, mint, agastache, green onions, bay leaf, Cuban oregano, ginger, turmeric, lemongrass, and garlic chives. For zones 8 and up, I recommend growing traditional herbs like fennel and dill during fall, winter, and spring. Let's talk about corn, specifically sweet corn. Corn seeds are easily direct sown at this time of the year, and you should get really good germination since the soil temperatures are nice and warm. In zones 8 and up, you can succession sow sweet corn starting in around January and February, with the last one being, I prefer sometime in August, just to make sure that I harvest my corn before the cooler weather arrives. But you can succession sow them up once every 3 or 4 weeks to keep your harvest of corn going for a very long time. Now, I would say the number one issue you're going to have with trying to grow corn during the summer is the corn earworm. Those worms, for whatever reason, are super tough, so I specifically recommend the use of spinosad spray, not BT, spinosad, if you want to control the corn earworm. The corn earworm is tough because it will bore into the stalks of your corn plants or even the ears of corn or cobs that are forming. And so once they get inside of there, it's virtually impossible to treat for them. The sprays aren't going to touch them. Here in Florida, I don't even recommend that you grow corn unless you're prepared to spray with spinosad because they will get those worms. Some of you in states north of us don't have such a worm issue, which is awesome, but that is not my case. I have to do something about it or they will eat up the entire crop of corn. As soon as you see worm damage on your leaves of corn and that kind of thing, or chewed up leaves, you need to start spraying. Every day that passes by, that worm population is increasing and gets out of control really quickly, and they will go eat your other plants as well. I have several videos about growing corn, in particular a YouTube tutorial showing you how to grow it from seed all the way to harvest, if you need more tips and help trying to be successful growing corn. Now, since you can't grow traditional lettuce, let's talk about some heat-tolerant greens that will survive during your summer. Two examples include Molokia and New Zealand spinach. In those cases, they're easily started from seeds, so I like to go around my garden, and if I see any bare spots, just sprinkle some seeds in there. Alright, so that's about it for everything that you can start from seed, direct sow, whatever, during the month of May. Let's talk about the things you should be transplanting in the month of May. Here are some heat-loving tropical greens that you can transplant. I've got some longevity spinach and some Okinawan spinach. Other examples include katuk, yerba mate, Siso spinach, and South Sea salad tree. I say to transplant these into the garden because they're not typically started from seed. They're usually started or propagated from cuttings like these. And if you need some plants, I definitely have some on my website. Let's talk about another fun summer tropical crop to grow, and that's sweet potatoes. I like to get my sweet potatoes in the ground during the months of May and June because they need a good 4 to 6 months to get a nice big size before you decide to dig them out, because I don't like small sweet potatoes. With that said, if you planned on starting your own sweet potato slips, you should have done that a couple months ago. Usually it takes around 2 months for a slip to develop and be transplant ready size. Many instructions for sweet potatoes will say they're ready to harvest in about 90 days, but I disagree. You can harvest them at 90 days, but they will be very small, and I like to harvest anywhere between 150 to 180 days when the potatoes are very big. If you're planting sweet potatoes during the month of May, keep in mind, if you're in Florida, it's still dry season, so just make sure that you keep an eye on them and give them some extra water if needed. Let's talk about peppers and eggplants. It is too late to start these crops from seed, but you can transplant if they're a nice big size. Both peppers and eggplants really benefit if you put a nice amount of organic fertilizer, azomite, rock dust, rock phosphate, those kinds of things into the planting hole, because it helps stimulate thicker, better, stronger stems, which will produce a lot of flowers and bigger fruit. You really want to pump your peppers and eggplants with lots of nutrition so that they get as big as possible, and most importantly, nice big developed root systems that will help these plants survive through summer. Both peppers and eggplants love full sun. They really do. But if you're in Florida, our full sun is more than just normal standard full sun. So I actually find that they do a lot better if they get some afternoon shade to protect them from the most amount of heat during the day. especially during the summer. The number one pest that I see during the middle of the summer on my eggplants and peppers are whiteflies. I think the whiteflies really like the moist, humid conditions when we start getting rain every day, so just keep an eye out for any kind of whitefly infestations. Your pepper and eggplants might look like they're really struggling during the summer, but if you can get the plants to survive, they'll perk back up once the temperatures cool down a little bit towards the end of September, and they'll keep growing and flowering and producing more fruit. These are perennials, so just as long as you keep them healthy, they will survive if you're in zones 9 and up. I have quite a few YouTube tutorials on how to grow peppers and eggplants from seed all the way to harvest if you need some ideas and tips to be successful. Some of my favorite root crops to grow during the summer are ginger and shampoo ginger. If you're in zones 9 and up, it's safe to plant these root crops outdoors. I have a tendency to grow them in containers or grow bags because they easily spread through underground rhizomes. For example, this was one ginger plant that I planted here in this corner, and now I have ginger sprouting on the complete opposite ends. So that tells me that it expanded underground through its rhizomes. Gingers really like the tropical conditions here in Florida, so they go rampant. They will spread. So to control it a little bit better, I do like to grow them in grow bags. This one is culinary ginger, so I just harvest knobs at a time as needed while I'm cooking or making tea. So I'm not going to dump this whole thing and harvest it all, but I do find it's much easier to dig out rhizomes from like a grow bag or a container than taking a shovel and having to dig them out of the ground. And there are so many other tropical root crops that you can grow right now, like yucca, galangal, malanga, taro, banado, yakan, and turmeric, like this turmeric right here. Depending on the time of year, I do offer rhizomes for culinary ginger, shampoo ginger, and very soon some of the other root crops like turmeric on my website. These root crops typically need 9 to 12 months to mature and grow before they're ready to be harvested. So it's important that you start planting them now, like in the month of May. I would say the latest being the month of June. So that way you harvest everything before cooler weather arrives in wintertime. Let's talk about any tropical fruit crops you can plant right now in the month of May. These crops I'm about to mention are better suited for areas that don't get any snow. You can plant pineapples, papaya, Barbados cherry, like this Barbados cherry tree that I have here. It's one of my favorite summer fruits. There's Chama, which I have one right there. Jamaican strawberry trees, ice cream bean, bananas, passion fruit, blackberries, muscadine grapes, and mulberries. All of these can be planted outdoors from either crowns or transplants. Just keep them watered until they are established so they're ready for handling summer. All you have to do is make sure that you keep them watered until the plants are more mature and established. In Florida, May is still a dry month, so pay extra attention to young fruit trees. Lastly, we have a couple crops that you can either start from seed or transplant during this month. The first one is gooseberries. I call them ground cherries, but there are so many names for this same crop. The number one thing I would say about starting ground cherries from seed is that the seeds require light, or they're not going to germinate. So do not cover the seeds with soil, just like press them down gently onto the soil surface and then put it underneath a very strong light, whether that be an artificial light or the sunlight. Depending on the time of year, I sometimes sell plants on my website for ground cherries as well. I love growing ground cherries because they're actually perennial in zones 9 and up. So again, trying to meet my goals of planting more perennial edible crops. And I love the flavor of them. Some people don't mind them that much, but I adore them. They have a very strong, fruity kind of flavor. The cherries are ready to harvest when the paper husks that surround them are completely dried out. A lot of times they'll fall to the ground when they're ready and ripe, which gives them the name ground cherries. So that's what they look like. The flavor reminds me of like pineapple, strawberry, banana, like a mixture of different tropical fruits. I really like them. I prefer to eat them fresh, but sometimes people make jams or pies with them. Really good. It's delicious. It almost tastes like a tangerine. They also have a high amount of vitamin C. If you're in a hot climate like me here in Florida, this is a crop that you can grow in some partial shade. So I really like to plant it underneath my fruit trees. I have a bunch of fruit trees here in a row, or under regular trees. All right, so we're finally at the end of my list of all the things that you can grow during the month of May. The last two crops that I want to talk about is Roselle. Here's a plant right here. I do sell them on my website. And Thai double blue butterfly pea. Both of these are perennial crops if you're in zones 9 and up. Roselle is part of the hibiscus family, but it produces these big calyxes that are harvested to make Roselle tea, and that usually happens at the end of fall. So Florida goes crazy with harvesting all of its roselle towards the end of fall. To get a good calyx harvest, you want your plants to be as big as possible. So start planting your roselle right now. That way by fall time, they should be like around 6 feet tall, something like that. The taller the plant, the bushier, the more calyxes you're gonna harvest. And then this is the Thai double blue butterfly pea. It is perennial in my zone 9 and up. It survived the winter. I didn't cover it, none of that. I don't cover anything in my garden during the winter. And it's a vine, so I have it growing up this tree. It produces these beautiful blue frilly flowers that are used to make a pretty famous Thai blue colored tea. The color is due to its high antioxidant levels, so it gives it this beautiful blue color. A lot of people like to make tea with it. You can dry the flowers and then powderize them to use it as like a natural food dye. Pretty versatile and fun plant to grow. I like to start planting this right now, May and June, because it loves the heat, the warmth, the rains. It'll take off, grow nice and big before winter comes. The bigger the plant, the better the chances are that it will survive through the winter. Most commonly, I have seeds available for the Thai double blue butterfly pea on my website, and occasionally I also have plants. This is some Kajari Melon that I'm actually growing this for the first time. I can't believe that it's taken me so many years to finally get around to growing this, because this is a cantaloupe or melon that comes from India, so it boasts like a pretty high heat and disease resistance. I do recommend direct sowing seeds for melons like this right now. I actually just direct sowed more seeds right underneath it as a succession crop. So as soon as I see that my cucumbers or melons are starting to produce, I'll start direct sowing in more seeds to keep that succession going. Now, I know the summer months can be grueling, okay? You might even see me less on social media and stuff like that because it gets so hot that my phone overheats and I can't do videos. And it doesn't matter what time of day, morning, evening, it doesn't matter. It's always extremely hot. So I apologize if I'm a little bit absent. It's just really difficult to get out here. I guarantee if you grow the crops that I just mentioned, you definitely will reap a harvest, and it'll make it worth enduring all of the outside heat and pain to get that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a big thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to my channel because I post monthly growing guides to help you guys out. Hopefully you got a lot of good ideas of crops that will endure your hot, rainy summers. That way you're still harvesting some food. Thank you for watching and happy gardening.